Welcome to the Wild Remedies podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Ancora, and I'm here to bring you captivating stories from some of the most fascinating people I've connected with on my own journey of physical, mental, and spiritual well-being. So sit back, relax, and get ready to be inspired. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Wild Remedies podcast. This is a really cool episode, guys. We are talking to Jesse Chesnutt. I just love his name. It's so great. He is from the Gene Keys. Now, you've probably heard me mention the Gene Keys a few times in some of our episodes. It is essentially a wisdom transmission. You can think of it a little bit like, like reading your astrology chart or your human design chart. Those are, a couple of things that might be a little bit more common, something you might have heard of before. The Gene Keys actually ties into both of those systems, but it's just very, very deep and rich. And there's so much there to explore. So today's episode, you're going to see that like it is very deep and it's fascinating. And if you make it to the end is like, well, for me, that was where all the really juicy stuff was, where I think you get a really good idea into how these wisdom systems tie together and what that looks like when it comes down to making decisions and getting, how can I say this? Essentially, you're going to get a real world example of what it looks like when you're able to extract wisdom from the traditions of like astrology and the Gene Keys and reflect those teachings into your own life that create a really good outcome for you. In this case, I don't know if it's created an amazing outcome yet, but it's something that has been calling to me for a little bit, and all of these pieces are kind of being put together. But you'll just see how all of these things fit. It's fascinating. It's really, really cool. And, Jesse and I have this conversation about like, how cool would it be if we had all started off life as children with, with our parents understanding some of these systems, because there's so much wisdom that we can garner in the sense of, there are tips on the best career paths for us and, challenges that we may face in our love life. And it, essentially gives us a heads up that these might be things that we're going to come across in our life. But there are things that we can do to make the challenges in our life a little bit easier and take paths that lead to a lot of prosperity that we may not have considered because of societal conditioning or, the thing that your parents told you that you should do. Like I was almost a dental hygienist, y'all. Like that's what I originally went to university for. I mean, it was only like a year or two and I was just like, this is bullshit. Like definitely not for me. No, sorry, mom and dad. That's not going to happen. So like I listened to my intuition very early on, but there's a lot of people that just like, feel pressured by family members or want to make people proud in their lives. So they do a profession their whole entire life that they actually fucking hate. Right. So anyway, I'm kind of rambling on here, but it's really cool. Again, it's very deep. There's a lot of information here, but just stick it out to the end because yeah, it's really fascinating. A little bit about Jesse. Jesse is a modern mystic, a philosopher, a teacher, and a Jedi. He is the owner of Woven Wisdom with Jennifer Brooks, which is a holistic network supporting indigenous artisans in Central America. Oh, that's cool. We didn't chat about that on the episode, but very cool. Jesse is seeking hidden connections between many fields of perception and study. These fields include sacred geometry, metaphysics, martial arts, the I Ching, the Gene Keys, unified metaphysics, transpersonal psychology, shamanism, literally all of the things. He works for the Gene Keys as a media team member, and he's also on Clubhouse as a host there, and he is a certified Gene Keys guide. And so you'll see Jesse kind of gives me a little bit of a reading at the end, so you'll get an idea as to what that looks like. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump in to meet Jesse and learn about the Gene Keys.
Hi, I'm Maddie. Let me tell you a quick story of how I'm supporting my PCOS with Wild Remedies Spiced Chocolate Magic Latte. First of all, I'm a registered holistic nutritionist, so you know I'm investing in finding long-term, sustainable approaches to wellness. Living with PCOS, when things are feeling a little out of balance, it's common for me to wake up groggy, have blood sugar crashes throughout the day, or become totally overwhelmed by daily stressors. My morning coffee was causing blood sugar spikes, anxiety, and tummy trouble, so I swapped it for Wild Remedies Spiced Chocolate Magic Latte about a year ago, and believe me when I tell you that the change has been insane. Each sachet has 3 servings of wild Siberian chaga, a powerful antioxidant-rich adaptogenic mushroom that helps to fight inflammation and fatigue and regulate the immune system. It tastes like a creamy hot chocolate with just a hint of spice, and it keeps my stomach calm. Since swapping, I feel more clarity and calm throughout the day, and my morning magic latte helps to set clear intentions for the rest of my day. I save 15% on my monthly subscription at wildremediesshop.com, and at $2.50 per serving, it's saving me a ton on Starbucks runs and supplement orders. Check out the links and promos in the show notes to get your own. Your adrenals will thank you.
Welcome to the Wild Remedies podcast, Jesse. I am so excited to be chatting with you today. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah. So looking forward to this. I think I've mentioned the Gene Keys on like 4 episodes now, where I'm like, I don't really know how this works yet, but I'm really interested. And I've been doing my own self-study, and I keep mentioning that, I don't know, I'm probably interpreting this wrong. And so I'm really glad that you're here today so we can chat about it. But I met somebody who kind of works in the Gene Keys a little bit, and he's intuitive. Got into a conversation. I was just telling him about some of the health challenges that I've had in my life, and that seems to be a theme for me. And he looks at me and he's like, starts talking about this 47th gene key, and I'm like, okay, I have no idea what this means. And I go home and I fill out my free profile on your guys' website, and right at the top of my chart says is the 47th gene key, and I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what this means, but it sounds bad, and I'm probably just doomed. And what does this all mean? I don't know. So that's kind of how I got started on my journey. And I have a couple of books by Richard Rudd, who's the founder of the Gene Keys, correct?
Yes.
The most recent one, I think it's The 64 Ways. Is that right? The white book? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so reading his interpretation of the 47th gene key, I'm like, oh, okay, this isn't actually that bad. It was just my own perceptions initially. But yeah, it's really cool. It just seems like there's so much wisdom here. And so I'm really excited to have you on today to explain more about what the gene keys are, because I think this is something that can help a lot of people.
Thanks. Yeah, that's such a funny introduction to it, and something that I think can be there can be some triggering things that are part of it. You know, there's just a little context. There are these 64 different gene keys, and they're connected to the 64 different codons of DNA. So the whole language of life is written in the language of DNA, and there are 64 different letters that write up these, you know, all of the genetic codes. And there's, I'm not going to say a number, but, you know, maybe 1 million digits in these codes that live in every cell. And, but there's this language that it uses, and it has these 64 different patterns. And so this system is based off of the genetics that everyone has. But also it's based on an ancient system called the I Ching, which comes from China. And they believed that there were these, you know, basic it's basically the interpretation of yin and yang energies, or a binary system. It's either ones or zeros, on or off, up or down, left or right. And if you put these together, so if you stack multiple yins and yang lines together, it creates eventually 64 fundamental blueprints of energy that the ancient Taoists believe could describe all motions and movements of the universe. So this is a very ancient system, 4,000 years ago, and they thought they cracked the code of life. And flash forward 4,000 years later, and we realize that there are 64 individual letters that make up all of life. Literally, it's come full circle in a lot of ways. And so the wisdom of the I Ching is really old and really beautiful and very mystical. It connects to psychological expression in many ways, but also worldly expressions of how energy moves and changes. And so the Gene Keys has put a lot of this information together, a lot of this wisdom traditions together, into a modern synthesis that combines many different philosophies, filters, ways of looking at things into one, synthesis is the word that Richard Rudd uses. That is a really beautiful word. That is all things coming together into oneness, essentially. And so what's really beautiful is, there are these 64 different keynotes, these 64 different fingerprints that the universe creates in. And, you have this 47th at the top of your chart. And what's really interesting are there are these three words that are, that embody the frequencies of these gene keys. And one of them is a very low frequency, which is known as the shadow. There's a higher frequency emanation that's called the gift. And then there's this very high frequency called the Siddhi. It's Siddhi. It's a term for like a special power, or this, magical gift of consciousness that comes from the East. And so there's one genetic that's imprinted by this code. There's one sort of energetic imprint that's put in by this 47th code, but it has very different meaning from a low frequency state to to the higher states. And so specifically, this one is known as oppression. And oppression in the shadow it's a rough word. It's a hard pill to swallow in many ways. And I feel like many people have felt oppressed by a system, misunderstanding peers, failure at sports or school, then there's plenty of racial oppression and cultural oppression and some of these bigger fields of oppression that are all over the world. And it's really rough. And what I love about this system is that it takes those really rough shadows that are seen in the world and definitely seen in our own experience, but we don't often like to think about those things, right? The shadow, it's filled with fear. It's filled with, really low frequency expressions. And most people don't enjoy them. They like to pretend that they don't have them. So being confronted by a shadow can be really jarring and really rough. But the beautiful thing about all these gene keys is that that's just the lower frequency expression. And by approaching and really facing and turning this shadow, in the shadow lies a hidden gift. And this is the journey of this gift frequency that is the power of transmutation. So whereas we feel really oppressed by things and we feel like we have no voice and we have no movement through them, by really facing that oppression and really standing our ground and really approaching it, there is an opportunity to take all of the worst parts of something and to transmute them like an alchemist into a higher frequency. And once we realize the power of our consciousness to really soften and approach shadows and turn them. This is the alchemist's gift. This is really a profound journey that you can go on, where one of my favorite lines that Richard uses is to become a shadow hunter. So now, instead of running away from our shadows and running in fear of all the bad things that are part of ourselves or part of the world, we actually aren't afraid of the shadows anymore, because we have this power to transmute them, to literally, like an alchemist would take the base materials and to, through these different processes, to refine it into higher and higher elements. This is where we take the salt and turn it to mercury, and eventually into gold and sulfur. This this beautiful way of doing it. But instead of doing it out in the world, we're doing that in our own experience, in our own consciousness. And this is the real gold of the alchemists. This is how we, um, take the lump of coal and refine it into a diamond. How we really take all of those unrefined and unconscious fearful parts of ourselves, and through hard work and loving kindness and diligent contemplation, we really have the power to refine those unbecoming elements into things that are really endearing and really empowering and really resonate, not just with yourself but with others. And this eventually leads to the city of transfiguration, which is this very cosmic principle of, Jesus, when he was crucified and then when he resurrected, he became transfigured as an eternal spirit. And so this is kind of touches into that energy, that if you spend a whole lifetime transmuting all of your shadows into gifts, at some point there's like the potential to really get in touch and in tune with this eternal divine spirit that lives in every being. But that's not the goal or the end part, or the part I like to focus on. I really love to look right into the heart of the shadow and seek the gift. And this gift is something that you can use every day, and something that turns lemons into lemonade. And I literally use this notion of alchemy every day of my life. I'm really grateful for the wisdom. So
That's so beautiful. So what I'm kind of understanding is that there's a lot of power by learning and studying your profile, right? Because it's, you know, I think everybody can kind of identify with certain themes, or yeah, just certain things that come up in your life over and over again that can feel oppressive, perhaps, in a way. Whether it's in, your prosperity or your love life or whatever that is, we come across these challenges that can continue to present themselves. And like, am I interpreting this correctly, that by learning how to work with these gene keys, or learning how to transmute these things, or learning how to go deeper into some of these shadows, we can kind of transform those into something that is more in line with a higher frequency of what we would rather experience, rather than just having to play out the same cycles over and over again?
Yeah, I mean, from a psychological perspective, I think of it like things that, we make a million choices every day, or more, a billion choices every day. This is the realm of free will that we live in, and we have to choose. And it's, for me, the pattern is, do we choose it consciously or do we choose it unconsciously? And to me, that's a huge shift. And many of us, myself included, make a lot of these decisions subconsciously, from things that I inherited from my parents in my childhood, things that I inherited from my schooling and my culture, my language, the lens that I see things through. These are all subconscious influences that are influencing the decisions that I'm making every day. And so oftentimes when you're talking about, these patterns that repeat themselves over and over, oftentimes what that is a whole set of subconscious movements that we keep making subconsciously, and it keeps putting us down a road where we fall into the same hole over and over and over again. And even if we are starting to recognize the pattern, it's amazing how we so often subconsciously choose that which is comfortable for us, that which we're used to. And so it may not be what serves us, which is something newer or higher or deeper. Oftentimes it's what's comfortable, what we naturally do. And so we make the subconscious decision. And oftentimes it's innocent in the moment, but 30 decisions later, we fall into the same hole where we go, why? I thought I figured this out about this type of person that I chase in relationship, or this way that I undermine my prosperity, or this way, fill in the dots. We have so many different ways that, we hold hopes for ourselves and then fall into a lot of the same patterns. And so what's really beautiful about the Gene Keys to me is that um, it isn't a system of therapy. It's not here to fix you or change you. You're not sitting down with someone else. Now, we do have guides. I'm a Gene Keys guide as well, and they're here to help guide you through the wisdom, but they're guiding you on your own journey of self-knowledge. And that's what the Gene Keys really are, is it's a living wisdom transmission based in the ancient and stretching into the future. Like, it definitely spans many things. It taps into the genetics. It taps into the I Ching and this kind of oracular force of knowing that how nature moves, and the propensity of, like, if it's doing this, it's probably going to do this next, and it's probably going to do this after that. That's what the I Ching is really good at kind of describing. It helps us navigate a lot of the psychological traps and the psychological expressions that we hold. But it also connects into astrology, and it's based off of your birth chart. And so your profile is like the fingerprint of energy that was alive the moment you were born. And so, it connects these multiple fields together into this living synthesis that no one can really tell you what is there for you, but we can walk together along that path. And so, like you were asking about the 47th, that's just my reflection of the 47th. But sometimes I always feel like in life we've forgotten a lot. And the real trick is to wake up and to remember what our cells really know, and what our true spirit actually knows, and what our inconceivable mind really knows, like the wide mind that really is in touch and in tune with the quantum universe. There's a part of us that's connected to all that, and we're just here helping each other remember this connection. And so the Gene Keys is a system brought through by Richard Rudd, who claims to be the first student of the Gene Keys, which I think is such a humble and beautiful way of, he's not the author. He didn't create all this. This is a timeless wisdom that was created by and with the universe. And I really love that humility from him. But it's this amazing system of knowledge that is like a mirror that can reflect some of these patterns back to us, so we can look into those shadows that most people, I don't know about you, but most people, when a shadow comes up that is something that I hold inside of my psyche, I don't really love looking at it, and I don't love proclaiming it publicly and talking about it with my friends or on a podcast. But I've come to know the power of owning and facing those shadows, because when I do, that's when they can be transformed. And now I'm not running from shadows anymore. I say, oh, hi, old friend. Oh, man, you make me feel weird inside, but I'm here with you, and I'm going to sit through that. And on the other side, once I'm no longer afraid of that shadow, it's amazing the change that can happen. And oftentimes, it's those small decisions that we make that now, when I recognize the shadow, where I normally would turn my head and walk left down the street and fall into that pothole. Now I'm able to see it for what it is and say, I'm going to make a harder choice right now in this moment, but it's going to lead me to not fall into that same trap that I've done over and over and over in my life.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I think there's so much power that this wisdom holds for people. But I think the one thing that can be a little bit challenging is just when you're, like in my case, when you're first introduced to it, it's like, whoa, okay. So, like I said, you go to the website, you get your free profile, and then you get this profile that, it looks kind of like a human design profile. And I think there are, some similarities that kind of tie in with human design. Is that correct? Yeah.
Certainly. Yeah. Richard worked with Ra, who was the
Right.
first student of human design, and Richard was an early student of Ra, and they worked together and developed a lot of the early integral human design systems. So they're very much wedded. But they're also systems that evolved separately too. Like they went their own ways, and so where they're embedded in the similar ways of connecting genetics and astrology and the I Ching, the Gene Keys has really grown and evolved in a different way, and so now they are separate systems that are similarly sourced, is how I would say
Mm-hmm.
it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely a lot of similarities there. Um, I don't know a ton about human design other than just, pulling up my profile on an app and it tells me certain things. And some of the things seem really helpful, but I'm by no means an expert. But I've been digging into astrology a little bit, in particular, looking at North Node energy after having an amazing karmic astrologer on the podcast. For anybody who's listening, with Vika Bradford, I highly recommend listening to her podcast a few episodes prior. But it's really interesting because I'm getting all of these little tidbits about, you know, not so much well, yeah, like there's a lot of information about purpose in life and things that are really kind of, shocking to me, right? Like there's teaching, for example, which is not something that I would have ever considered to be like a path for me. um and this theme of community, right? So like prosperity coupled with community and partnership, which intuitively to me always seemed like something that um, there was like a passion there, but always, but also a challenge. And then when I look at the gene keys, like of course I've had like this little profile that's come up, and I'm seeing these words of community, and then kind of digging into and like doing these contemplations on some of the keys, and like seeing a lot of these similar words and themes pop up. I'm going like, oh, okay, like this is definitely all connected. I'm still at like the very beginning of the journey. But it's pretty interesting because some of this information is actually guiding me with decisions that I'm currently making in my life right now. And these aren't choices that I would normally make, but it's been really helpful, which is very cool.
Mm.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I think that's really beautiful way of connecting with astrology is, you know, in my, you know, I guess I studied in transpersonal psychology. And so that's really a lot of my, where my studies root is in consciousness studies. And the way
okay.
I have come to see things is that, we tend to think that our mind and our brain is 95% of our personality in the world, right? It just seems like everything that we see and think, it's so much. But I've come to see it that the ego and the mind is actually this tiny pinhole that we're looking through, that it's actually the opposite. It's more like 1%. in the whole frequency of energy of visible light, the eye sees 0.00001% of all of the energy fields. The ears hear slightly a bit more, so it's 0.00001% or something like that. It's literally a slice of the full frequency that's out there. And so our mind that takes up so much space in our head and takes up rent in our lives, that really fills so much, it's actually a smaller part of our life. And so to me, some of these systems of knowing really help us expand outside of what we normally think, what we think of as our reality and our personality. And so these systems that, there's so many, but there's these experts, that like Vika in Vedic astrology, and there's everyone has their own kind of lens that they can really look and um, help you see deeper and further. And I just think it's such a beautiful mystery, and a reminder to get past what you think, and to really be open. And what we think is a small, tiny blip on the big screen of life. My favorite is this notion of the body. And so the body is this collection of 26 trillion cells. And each cell is its own individual with its own, shell and its own purpose, and it's going along in the body, but it makes one body, right? And so there's all of these separate pieces that all work in perfect coherence to make this vessel that I'm traveling in. And I, thank God, don't have to think about telling them what to do. They know what to do. I don't have to talk to the kidneys to make sure they're, filtering my blood. I don't have to talk to the cells to make sure they're dividing and replicating DNA perfectly. Like, I don't even have to think about breathing. Now, I can think about all these things, but the point is I don't have to. And they're all working in perfect coherence. And to me, this is that great reminder, is that the mind sits on top of and travels around inside this unbelievable body that is truly miraculous in nature. Like, just the fact that we are coordinated, that we can walk, that we can stand, that we can talk, that we can listen to each other, that we can sleep, that we can drive and text and not even look at the road and somehow make it where we're going. There's so much on autopilot that to me is really honored and really important to be remembered. And so just like there are all of these cells that are in perfect coherence, there too are the planets and the stars and the light of the sun and the magnetic field of the earth and all of the molecules that are supporting us. There are these bigger worlds and smaller worlds that too are in perfect coherence, but we don't think about them all the time. But it's really beautiful to have these things like astrology and the gene keys to help us in some of those decisions when we are stretching a little bit beyond our self-image and
Totally. And can you imagine being introduced to these tools as like a kid, or at least having like parents who have these tools? Can you imagine like the trajectory our lives would take? Because a lot of what we think we should be doing is just programming from society, right? Like, I mean, I I almost became a dental hygienist because my parents told me to, right? Like, I would have jumped off a bridge. Like, that is definitely even if I had gone down that path, I wouldn't have lasted very long for sure. I ended up taking the path of art and design and then, entrepreneurship. But that was originally what I was going to university for. And I think there's a lot of people that end up making those choices and committing to them because it's the right thing to do, or because they want to make somebody proud, or because of, certain wounding and not enoughness and all of these things. And like this, it like instead of having a
what is it called? Like those counselors in high school, you know,
Guidance
a career
counseling, yeah.
counselor or whatever. Can you imagine if like this was the tool instead? Like how cool would that be?
Yeah. So I have the great honor of becoming a new father in this
Aw,
past year.
amazing.
And so I can really picture raising a child in this wisdom of knowledge and reflection. And it's nothing I'm going to force on her, but it informs my decisions in so many ways, and it gives me ways of understanding those harder moments, especially when things don't go exactly to plan, how to really transmute those experiences. And yeah, I'm so excited to think about um, because a lot of our way is that, as you said, you know interpreting what our parents said and what our society says and what our culture says that we should do, and some of it is you know deconditioning from that, really learning and listening to what is it that I want to do, like how do I want to spend my time, what lights up the fire in my belly, what is it that I could do for free that just makes my mind crackle, and I want to study and I want to learn and I want to share and I want to talk about it. And I've been really lucky that the Gene Keys just sings to me in that way. And so it lights me up to talk about it and to share about it, and then to raise my daughter and to communicate with the Gene Keys with my wife too. And it's helped in our relationships. Every relationship goes through bumps and bruises. Love expands and it contracts, and it goes left and it goes right, and sometimes it's rough. A committed long-term relationship is a real teacher, and it's not all roses and honeymoons. There can be some really um, tricky changes that happen. And so this wisdom also helps to reflect how to really be in relationship with someone, and how to take those bumps and those triggers, and not just accuse, oh, this is your fault, you've done this to me, but to really claim responsibility for our part in things, and to eventually, the goal is to return non-love with love. And that's the mission of the Venus sequence. So the profile is this hologenetic profile, it's called, and it's this amazing 11 or 13 spheres that are there, which, you're right, when you first pull it up, it's numbers and letters, and it can be a little hard to digest, but it's broken down into these journeys of awakening your genius, your four prime gifts, and then the love sequence or the Venus sequence. And this is you know how to keep your heart open. And then there's the prosperity sequence, the pearl sequence at the end, that is how to return that love that's flowing through you now, and how to give that to the world, and how to really ring out your gifts into the world, and to receive abundance for that. So there's breaking it down into pieces is really important, but it still can be a little overwhelming. There's these books that are sold. This is the Venus book, and so you can follow along by yourself, and that's how I studied most of it. I got books and I just sort of studied, but there are these larger community um, experiences that happen, called deep dive retreats, and we go together collectively. Each person is studying their own individual chart, but we're on this journey together. And it is unbelievable how much easier it is to walk down the darker paths of your own shame and fear and guilt and these shadows, to look at the wounding that we picked up in our childhood, and the things where we didn't treat others the way that we wish that we had, these regrets and guilt and some of these things. By looking at these with a collective group of people, it's so much easier. You don't feel alone. And so if people are interested in this wisdom, I really recommend joining one of these retreats. And really, it's so much easier. Like, with all wisdom systems, you are the only one that can do it. Like no one can do it for you. No one has all the answers. This is a journey for yourself, but to do it together is just really makes everything so much easier and more pleasant. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have been wanting to sign up for one of the programs for sure. But I'm wondering where to start because there are all of the sequences, but there's one that it's like the golden path, right?
Mhm.
That's kind of where you want to jump in.
So the golden path is all of these put
Okay.
together. So
Okay.
the golden path is the whole journey.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the first place to start is genekeys.com, and you just sign up and opt in for. Um, we're not stealing your data or anything like that. It's all internal, but you can go and get a free profile, and then it will be connected to your account. And there are a few free programs, and we're developing one right now called New to the Gene Keys. And so it is going to be, we're really filling this part out for exactly what you're saying. Like, this seems amazing. It's super interesting. The book is so long, and the profile is so like hard to get into. Like, where do I start? How do I go? And so we're currently developing that right now. And so I really look forward to that because there are a lot of beautiful questions and a lot of that confusion early on of knowing where to start. But after that, if you get a taste of so when you create your profile, you can download an audio that is the audio of your life's work. And your life's work is connected to the sun sign. So I was born in August and I'm a Leo. And so this is the part of my chart that represents that Leo energy that most people who know astrology think of first and foremost is as your personality of how the sun lights you up is kind of how I talk about it. And so this life's work is connected to that. And so you can download this audio of Richard Rudd, who is, he's this amazing man, but he's also this amazing poet and amazing mystic. And he just has this voice that I could just listen to forever. And so he has these audio contemplations. So there's the book, the Big Gene Keys book, and you can read about your life's work in there. But there's also this audio contemplation that, to me, it's one thing to read something and it's another to listen to a poet or a bard muse on these things, and it really has a different way of hitting the heart and really sinking in. So that's where you begin. And then if you're interested, the first sequence that we recommend is starting with that life's work, and it's called the activation sequence, and this is where you activate the parameters of your chart. And so yeah, you can find all this stuff at genekeys.com. And yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful journey. There are some really amazing things that I'm part of that are free as well. And so you can also get a taste of the community. So I hold a public and free space twice a week on Clubhouse, which is an app. It's an audio app. And there's some crazy stuff on Clubhouse. Clubhouse can be a little wild, but the Gene Keys has been on there for about a year and a half, and maybe a little longer. And it's the rooms that we have are really beautiful. A lot of very contemplative people who are really looking at their shadows and trying to do their best in the world. And there's some sharing and some information and wisdom being shared there that I think is really profound. So I would welcome you to look into Clubhouse and the Gene Keys and look for me, Jesse Chesnutt. I teach, not teach, but share space and share my voice on a room called Gene Keys and Parenting, where we contemplate how to bring this wisdom into the real nitty gritty part of life, raising children and also being a child, how to deal with parents and a lot of that genealogy or lineage kind of stuff. And then also the weekly pulse, where we contemplate the weekly gene key that is kind of connected to the astrological wheel. So instead of 12 seasons, there are 64 seasons because there's the 64 gene keys. So each week we contemplate a different one. And so that's called the weekly pulse room. And so anyway.
Cool. Wow. Okay. Well, lots to dig in there. That's great.
Mhm.
Thank you for that.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, now that everybody kind of has, I guess a little bit of insight into what the gene keys are, I was wondering if you'd be open to just doing like a little mini, I don't know, decoding of my profile a little bit. So just so people can get an idea of like the kinds of deeper insights that they can expect to receive by doing this kind of work. Would that be okay?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to
Yeah.
do that. My favorite place to start is that 47th gene key of the life's work.
Okay.
And it's, I spoke onto it before and won't go into it too much, but this is a really beautiful key that's also very difficult. So in the
Mhm.
ancient I Ching, it's known as oppression. And one of the ways that the I Ching has been used for 4,000 years is someone says, I'm starting this new adventure. Tao, tell me how this venture is going to go. And you roll these coins, you throw these sticks, you shake the bones. It's kind of like a tarot system. And there's a way of divining what happens with the I Ching. And so if you're asking, how's this new relationship going to go, and you roll the 47, it's not looking up,
It's
right?
not the one you
It's
want.
it's oppression.
Right.
You are forcing something into a place that is in between a rock and a hard place. And so that can feel really rough. And it's like you said, you like read the book and you're just like, "Oh my God, I'm doomed forever." And this is the beautiful thing about the Gene Keys is it says no. Actually, you hold something so powerful that even oppression cannot stop you, that you have the power to transmute all of the ill in the world, all of the rough stuff, the things that no one else wants to deal with. You have the ability to transform them into something else. And
Mhm.
so to me, that's one of the most powerful gifts that this wisdom tradition like really allows for. Yeah, beautiful. Cool. So, yeah, I wish I could screen share it to make it a little bit more clear, but I'll just describe maybe just the activation sequence, the first steps that we
Mhm.
go through. And what's really beautiful in this wisdom is that, in astrology, we think about where the sun was where we were born. So for me, it's a Leo. And but what is taken into account in the gene keys is also where the earth was when you were born. And this is the second sphere. This is the first journey that we go on. So there's this matching pair of the life's work and the evolution. And this is where the sun was when you were born and where the earth was where you were born. And this is really the mission of the Taoists, is to bring heaven to earth and to offer our gifts from earth up to heaven, to send our prayers up. And this is really the embodiment that the Eastern philosophy really speaks of. And I think it's beautiful. I spent most of my early years looking out in the world for what made me happy and what was successful. And it's been a much more pleasant journey to really take all of that deep inside of my body and to really embody those gifts in a new way, and therefore offer the deepest passions that I have for the benefit of all beings, to return some of that. And so this journey in many ways of our incarnation is encapsulated in the snapshot of the moment that we were born, of where the light of the sun was coming in and informing our soul, and it's to bring the power of that light all the way down and to fully incarnate it on the earth. And this is the great challenge of our incarnation. And so these two keys, the first two keys, really act as opposites. So in the I Ching, they're made from yin and yang lines. And if you change all of the yin lines yang and all the yang lines yin, so you just make them into opposites, literally these are known as programming partners. And so these are those opposite expressions, and they live across the calendar from each other. So whereas my sun is in Leo, that means the earth is in Aquarius for me specifically. And so it's really this challenge to embody these two opposite archetypes, to really bring heaven to earth, to bring yin to yang, to find this middle way that I think has so much wisdom to gain. You know, taking it into the modern world, there's everything seems divided and everything seems really confusing. And I think somewhere in between is the real truth. You know, there's so much confusion in the separateness, and that somewhere in between, this integration of paths is really part of it. And so the journey of your specific one is to move from this oppression into what's known as grace, and it's the 22nd gene key. And this is another beautiful journey, but it's really deep and it's really powerful. And this will be the challenge of your incarnation, is to transform the feelings of dishonor, which is in the shadow, and to find how to face into dishonor and to move with graciousness. And this is the gift, is graciousness. And graciousness is, you know, it's a kind sentiment. It's returning with compassion things. It's a soft way, and it eventually moves into the city of grace, which, you know, I like to think of a dancer has grace, and a certain piece of music has grace that can open our heart and make us cry. But, you know, grace is also, there's like this notion of divine grace, you know, these moments where the divine comes down. And like, I think of a beautiful sunset when you're having a hard moment. You maybe go through a breakup, or you're in a fight or something, and you go outside and all of a sudden the clouds part, and a ray of sun comes down and it lights up this perfect stone on the ground in front of you, and you feel like this moment where in the pit of sorrow, in the pit of sadness, there is this light, you know, this kind of divine moment. And so this to me is grace. It's connected with like the angels or something like that, you know, this notion of feeling seen by the unseen elements of the universe. And Richard in this 22nd gene key has a really beautiful statement that is, suffering is grace. And this is often misunderstood out of context, and it's something that really flips things on its head. But it's like this notion of being a shadow hunter. Once you know that suffering is actually how you can crack your heart open, how you can, you know, sometimes it is our suffering that makes us more humble and more open to receive the benefits of heaven or the angels or the divine, however we want to see that. And so there's a really profound journey in this, that between oppression and dishonor, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily a smooth and comfortable road, but it means that eventually, you know, there can be so much learning and so much wisdom, so much empowerment that can come from those rough moments, from that suffering, and from that confusion and oppression and dishonor, that it's not all, you know, destined to be terrible, that there is a profound journey. And now, once you are able to heal your own heart a little bit and to turn your dishonor and keep your heart open with graciousness, now you can spread that to others around you. You know, it's this notion of the wounded healer, that sometimes those who have gone through the most pain and the most trauma are the most approachable, because they too know what it feels like to be lost or alone or dishonored or to be oppressed. And so there's like such a depth of wisdom and power that can come from that.
This honestly reflects so much with, you know, the podcast that we did with Vika. She said the exact same words, the wounded healer.
Mm,
And so for anybody listening, you can see how all of these things are connected. Like literally, we have proof of it recorded on podcasts now, which is crazy. And again, for everybody listening, mine has been a challenging life for sure, right? Like I definitely have the archetype of the wounded healer. There's been a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, a lot of health challenges, and just choosing, you know, a more challenging path with entrepreneurship. It's not it's not an easy path. Um, so don't freak yourself out thinking like, oh my gosh, you know, diving into the gene keys is going to be like this. This is my special flavor and like my my journey that my soul has chosen for some super special reason to experience in this lifetime. Because I tell you, it's definitely hasn't been sunshine and roses all the time, but I do definitely get that. And this is a conversation that I've had many times. It's like this you know the theme of suffering that comes up so often because it's something that I'm used to at this point. It's also something that I feel that I can transform more quickly or that I have become much stronger for. It has made me more resilient in many ways, and so those are, you know, some of the gifts that come through these hardships. There's, you know, a depth and a richness that can be brought through the personality, that comes from suffering. And those are
yeah.
some of the lessons that, you know, I've had so far.
Well, beautiful. I'm glad that resonates, and yeah, not all charts are this way, and not all things are this way. But I'm glad that it resonates, and that to hear some of your journey. You know, like I had a similar, but different journey with my childhood. My parents split up at like 1 years old or something like that. Really young, and it left my own set of hardships and traumas to deal with these things. But through my life, it's really pushed me to have to deal with mommy and daddy issues, and to deal with how do I find real, true, lasting love in the midst of what was modeled to me wasn't lasting love. And so I think that everyone has this journey um, of hardship, that's just, we get bumps and bruises, and when there's twists and turns along the road, but we can become victims to it and really get stuck in those patterns and make endless subconscious decisions about it. But this system of awareness really allows for transmuting those, transforming those into more conscious and more joyful and more empowered kind of journeys. And I've really come to see that all of those shadows or traumas or hardships in my early life really led me to be who I am now, which is a much more free individual. I think sometimes some people will say, "Oh, I'm so sorry your childhood was so difficult and you didn't get this certain thing." And I said, "No, it's okay. It taught me how to really look at the shadows and how to really believe in myself, and how to." And my journey is my journey, but I think we all have these places. It's like I keep thinking of herbs, and plants as they grow, that if there wasn't a breeze, they wouldn't develop the strength to really stand,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes a little bit of trauma on the stalk of a plant actually makes it stronger. It's what allows the tomato plant to really stand up and hold all of the fruit. And so if it didn't have any of the stresses, then it wouldn't be quite as strong, and it wouldn't be able to support the fruit in the end. And so it's just a reminder that things aren't good and bad. They're like a yin yang, and they're all nested inside of each other. Like things just are the way they are, and sometimes they exert at a low frequency, and they can be really frustrating and fearful, and sometimes they exert at a high frequency, and they can seem much more easy and beautiful, but they're all part of the same thing that, oscillates from high to low and yin to yang, good and bad, all those things.
And so some of the words that you had mentioned, like the grace, right? So finding the grace, like would these be the tools or the things to look for in the times when the challenges arrive? Is like, does that help transmute the challenges faster, or like what are the tips?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I think everyone's journey is different. But the way that I like to think of it is when a shadow comes up, to kind of pause and to not just respond or react to it, because that's so often what happens is we either collapse in fear, which would be known as the repressive part, or the overly yin part, where we just try to disappear, or we just collapse and freeze, or reactive, which would be overly yang, where we say, get out of here, I don't want to do this, or whatever it is, we kind of explode, and that's overly yang. And so when this shadow arises, you just say, okay, I'm going to pause, I'm going to take a minute, I'm going to breathe, I'm going to feel into this. And to me, this is where the gift comes in, is right in the shadow, right in the moment when the shadow is triggered. I like to say, okay, I'm feeling dishonored right now, and I either want to tell someone off, or I want to collapse and cry and hide and not go to work for the next week. These are the two yin and yang expressions of that. Instead, I'm going to sit with this, I'm going to feel it, I'm not going to do anything with it yet, but when I do, I'm going to try to use the energy of graciousness. I'm going to try to see that, and that graciousness to me is like a salve, like a soothing balm that just like softens that pain or that wound that the shadow brings up. And then what it often does is I start to recognize their dishonoring me has nothing to do with me. This has to do with their own wounding that they're projecting out, or something. I've just come to see through psychology that we're all a bunch of mirrors, and it's hard to pick apart at first because we're very good at hiding it, and having these complex psyches and all of this stuff. But oftentimes I think that the thing that pisses you off, that you point out away from yourself, is really something that we hold inside ourselves. So oftentimes when someone has dishonored us, they're actually dishonoring themselves. And so this compassion or this graciousness can take this dishonor and just really transform it in a very real way. That because if you say, you're dishonoring me because you're dishonoring yourself, and you fight fire with fire or yang with yang, oftentimes that doesn't go so well. And so in some ways, this graciousness, this gift, is what I focus on, to really, when I do start to move, after pausing and just sort of feeling into that shadow, then I try to move and act with this gift. And that's really what the gift is it's the siddhi in action. So the siddhi is grace, and you move with graciousness. And so you're enacting and you're moving with graciousness, because these siddhis can be wild and really far out, and they're all about the future evolution of humanity, and what happens when we become enlightened, what that looks like, and it can be hard, especially when you're in a triggered shadow space, to really move all the way to that siddhi. But if we take that pause and drop that grace into our contemplation, and then move with graciousness, to me that's been the way that has really come alive in my life. And I don't get lost in the siddhis, or I don't get swallowed into the shadows, but I walk the gift daily. I really, it's like my walking meditation, where I bring that energy out into my life, and I try to embody it when I'm washing the dishes, and when I'm talking to my friends, and when I'm at work, and when someone cuts me off in traffic. All of these places, um, there's this opportunity there. So, I know I was speaking about the 22nd gene key and dishonor and graciousness and grace, but it really represents for all of the gene keys when you're feeling, or all of these states, when you're feeling really low frequency, fearful and survivalistic and triggered and hurt. Pause, take a moment, think about how you would like to respond, or how Buddha would respond. What would Buddha do? What would Jesus do? What would Mary Magdalene do? What would fill in the gaps? What would an angel do in this moment? And then just work on doing the smallest parts of that energy, and just practicing that mindfulness. And that can be represented in any of the gene keys, in any psychological state. And to me, this is really the power of claiming responsibility over your own feelings and actions, and being able to move from a deeper, more resource place of wisdom and love.
Yeah, well, that is a really good reminder, right? Like, it really is. It's like a daily meditation.
Yeah.
And a daily
And we're all
practice.
human, and we're all gonna totally throw it out the window every once in a while,
Yeah.
like, it's not about being perfect. And this is so much. So my life's work has the city of forgiveness. And so I'm just trying to forgive myself from all of my shortcomings and all the wrongs I've done, and forgive everyone around me. It's something that it's never finished, but it's we're all works in process. And it's sometimes this contemplation, especially the shadows, can feel so heavy, but it's also a reminder that it's not about being perfect. It's not about healing all the shadows so that we become enlightened and live in the cities. Like, we're here to fill our space with joy and with lightness, and oftentimes we do that by looking right into the shadows, and look right into the pain and the wound, and bring love there, because then it just transforms it, not in a perfect way, but in a very real way.
Yeah. I love that. Well, gosh, we're already at time, but I don't want to leave people on that kind of like 47 gene key, a little bit depressing note. Is there anything, okay, because what I think would be enticing for folks is like learning about, like, say, the prosperity aspect, right? Like, what are things that show up in the profile that can lead us to prosperity? Like, is there something in my profile that we can just kind of quickly look at to kind of give people an idea of what that looks like?
Sure. Yeah. So, I spoke about these three sequences going in order, and there's a really beautiful sequence that is the end of the Venus sequence, or the end of the love sequence, is the same sphere that begins the prosperity sequence. And so it's known as the vocation. And this is what is really your calling in the world, and is so much about what calls you out. Vocation is connected to the throat and the voice, and so it's like a vocal thing that you call out to the world, but it's also being called out. It's how is the world calling you into your purpose and your prosperity, to offer your gifts. And so you have this as the 44th gene key in the line 6. And so this is a really beautiful key that moves from the shadow of interference. It is the gift of teamwork and the city of synarchy. And synarchy is, I don't know if it's a made up word, but it's at least a hybridized word that is taken from hierarchy. And so hierarchy, we're very well aware, is the the pyramid, and there's the power that's on the top, and then the second rung and third rung, and everyone below serves everyone that's up high, and it takes away a lot of our autonomy and a lot of our freedom, and so there's a bridge between hierarchy, which is an old, more masculine model, like of the patriarchy and things like that, that I think we're evolving as a society to become a bit more sovereign, and it's moving towards what's known as heterarchy. And heterarchy, instead of being this top-down structure, heterarchy is much more equal, and it's on a same plane, and everyone has their own special gifts to offer, but no one is above or below anyone else. There's a much more natural system that exists similar to the way that the biosphere operates, and ecosystems, all of life. There's not a ton of hierarchies. Now, there is a food chain and certain things like that, but these ecosystems exist in self-autonomous systems. And synarchy is like the highest expression of that. And so syn means within, S-Y-N. And so it means within an organization, and it's totally enmeshed. It's much more like a holographic system rather than a hierarchical system. And so this journey from the lower frequency to the high frequency is that of interference. And it's these patterns that people use oftentimes to control each other. And so if you're doing something and you're along your way, someone wants to compete with you, and they come in and they kind of interfere with your business. They interfere with your flow or your direction, or steal your idea, or whatever it may be. The energy is not collaborative, it's interfering. And this has many ways of showing up, but in sake of time, like the way beyond that is really, to look at the interference patterns that you have with your own self and your own prosperity and purpose, but also to look at those around you that are interfering and kind of put some boundaries up there, not working with the same discordant energies, not following the same line and falling in the same pothole, or having the same relationship, the same agreement. It's finding those that are part of your soul family or your fractal family, finding those that are truly aligned with your gifts and your vision in the world. And it can be something that you recognize right away, but it can almost be like a whiff that you get of someone where you go, oh man, I'm feeling what they're putting up. Like this feels like a harmony. And this is the gift of teamwork. In business, it's really knowing who are your allies and who are not. And no ill will, but you're just very clear, this is an ally, then we're on the same team, and we're going to vibe, and it's going to go great. And, at the highest expression, it's offering your gifts and allowing others to offer their gifts for the benefit of all beings. So literally, like, there's no interference patterns here. Like, you're operating at very high level frequency, totally sovereign and whole unto yourself, but offering by working for the benefit of all in service to the whole. It opens these fields of synarchy, this coordination that, again, all of these cities are connected to kind of the divine emanation. It almost feels like you may not even know who you're working with, but you're all working on the similar vibe, the similar frequency. And this is really the power of synarchy. And so I'll just mention there's these lines, and they move from the first line, second line, third line,
I was
fifth line, sixth line. The sixth line is the last one to emerge. And so patience is the huge keynote of this line. And so if there's any advice, which we don't give advice really in the Gene Keys, but if there was any, just reading the pattern of energy, it's patience. That you hold a vision of the future that is very powerful, and it's not time for it to fully manifest here on Earth. You're like seeding the next era, the next system that is here to serve humanity. And so there can be a bit of impatience in there when we're like, oh, why aren't people doing this new way. Everyone's stuck in the old way. Like, let's go, and there can be this kind of impatience that if you're able to really embody that patience and to keep on with your vision, but not be frustrated when it doesn't happen right now or today or maybe even tomorrow, that you're actually seeding the future that all of humanity is waiting for. Like, we all need people that look forward, and the sixth line is known as the visionary and the teacher, and it takes time to really have those visions come all the way down to earth, and the teacher takes time to really become fully embodied. So give yourself some of that patience, but never give up on your dreams.
That was like everything that I needed to hear right now. Thank you.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And just to give everybody listening a little bit of context as to like why this is so helpful, like why this kind of information is so helpful, I find is this is reflecting a lot of what I'm going through right now, building a company and having challenges, and there has been a lot of impatience, like this should be working a certain way and it's not working this certain way, and it's taking a lot longer than I want it to. But this aspect of bringing in other people, that's just always kind of something that I've really loved. I've never worked in a way that, like, in a hierarchical way. I really despise that. Whenever I talk about anything to do with the business, it's never me, it's always we. It's never my thing, even though yes, I did create it from the ground up with blood, sweat, tears, but it wasn't just me, it was so many other people along the way. And there's a million different ways to build a business. And it's interesting because this ties in with what I've been learning about the North Node, and that my prosperity through business needs to come through teamwork and this synarchy and partnership. And I've played with partnership and things in the past, and there has been a lot of interference and it has not worked out well in the past, mostly because I didn't have clear boundaries, and I literally had this conversation yesterday with someone, because I'm now at a point where I know the path forward in this business is actually to bring on a partner of some sort. So I'm getting clear about that right now. But it's just something that's come up, honestly, in the past week. And it's something that I probably wouldn't have considered, or would have been a lot more trepidatious of, if I hadn't been doing all of this other work. But there have been things that I've pulled out of, say, astrology or the gene keys, that I've made little shifts in my life and noticed a lot more flow right away, right? With things, I've mentioned this before, but just with the podcast, it was something that, we just started because there's that teaching aspect that I always thought, like, that's strange. And, I'm not really directly teaching. I think people are learning just through the platform and by having amazing people like yourself come on. But it's been easy, like there hasn't been any resistance, and we get really amazing guests without, having to push really hard. There's not a lot of resistance there. And so I think that's where, there's so much power for people to discover more ease and flow in their life by, just looking at some of this stuff. So thank you so much for that, because that's very helpful and makes a lot of sense with what's happening in my life right now.
Yeah, I'm so glad. I love when the wisdom speaks for itself,
Mm-hmm.
and in many ways, Gene Key's guides are just interpreters
Yeah.
of the patterns that are already there, and I've really come to just trust it. It sings, and even the way that you were talking about that, your next sphere in the um, Pearl sequence is the culture sphere, and it has the keynote of partnership. And so I think you just used the word partnership or partnering, 5 or 6 times in the last couple minutes, really that's where your focus lies, and you work well in partnership. So even just our partnership here, this is your podcast, but we're we're having a relationship right now, a partnership where we're coming together and sharing. And so from the Gene Keys perspective, that's a really powerful place for you to look into it. And so the partnership of your guest and the host, but also perhaps in other aspects of your business to do too. You're comfortable in those partnerships. So yeah, it's just
With
amazing.
boundaries this time, though.
Well, that's the issue, right? That's the issue that we need to learn in relationship, is how to create a healthy partnership with
Mm-hmm.
boundaries that aren't made of concrete, but aren't made of kelp either. You know, like we really need like I like to think of a cell wall as the perfect model of a boundary. It's not something like rigid. It breathes, and food comes in, water goes out, waste goes out. It's very porous, but it's real. And there's a clear inside and a clear outside. There's an agreement of what comes in, what goes out, but it's not a castle wall. It's a porous and living intelligence. And to me, that's the best model of a boundary. And you're right, they're very crucial. And oftentimes we didn't receive them from our parents. We didn't learn how to develop them in school. And so we really need to work on making, instead of subconscious boundaries, more conscious boundaries. So.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Well, we'll leave it here for this evening. But thank you so much for all of this wisdom. It certainly helped me today. And I'm hoping it gets other people excited to start exploring the Gene Keys. So I know you mentioned where to find all of the things kind of in the middle of the podcast, but do you want to just kind of reiterate a little bit in case people want to jump right into it after this?
Yeah, and I can leave some links behind, but genekeys.com is where you connect with Gene Keys and all of that wisdom. I also have a website where I put my spin on the, translating the ancient I Ching and how it relates to the Gene Keys, and that's known as keysoftheiching.com. And so that's how you can connect with me. Personally, I offer Gene Keys guide sessions, and I'm really open to collaboration and answering questions. I'm kind of in the deep end of the transmission. I've really explored a lot of behind the scenes, like why things are. I have an inquisitive mind. So yeah, I look forward to anyone connecting on there, helping make the deep end a little more shallow and approachable. So, you don't have to be afraid of the transmission. And then, Clubhouse, follow the Gene Keys app and follow myself, Jesse Chesnutt, on Clubhouse, and really amazing stuff. And it doesn't cost anything. There's plenty that can come for free. And then if you're ready for more, welcome in. I've been in many different spiritual communities, different transmissions, and I've never found anything that gives me as much self-knowledge and as much self-empowerment, as well as like spiritual connection, but then honestly meeting people that are just really here to live their gifts into the world and to really bring about positive change for the benefit of all. And so on so many levels, there's a really amazing community. So welcome to explore that. And thank you so much. It's been a real honor and pleasure to be here with you. And I look forward to more.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Jesse. And for anybody listening, if you found this episode, extra inspiring, please give it a screenshot and share it on your Instagram stories or wherever you like to hang out, and let us know your thoughts. We'd love to hear what you think. And we'll catch you all on the next episode. Thanks so much for sharing your time and energy with us today. We'd love to hear your feedback on how our podcast has impacted your life, and are also open to suggestions for new and interesting topics. Please leave your comments with a quick review to help us grow this magical community of wellness warriors and light workers. Every month, we select one lucky reviewer to win our big magic box containing all 3 of our beautiful magic lattes. To connect with us further, check us out on Instagram at wild_remedies. Thank you again, and see you at the next episode.